grader and 8th grader.
And Jennifer, I'd say too, we got each person has 3 minutes.
Okay. Just a couple of things that I've been thinking about. I work in healthcare, and public health, have a background in that. I think that my concern for my family is if I determine that I want my kids to have online school until we feel really good about how school is going in the classroom, are we going to be able to re-enroll in their school that they're supposed to be in, KMS and Russell, or are there going to be any snags there? And if I choose to have them do online school until I determine it's safe for them, by my perspective, to go back, is there going to be an online free instruction option for Montana? I haven't found any good resources, or if people know those resources, I'd love to hear those. So I know that's not really something you can answer right now. Those are the things that I'm thinking about. Thank you.
And Micah, maybe you could give us, just clarify how the attendance policy could work and what direction OPI has said for enrolling and unenrolling kids. I know traditionally 10 days is kind of, we would drop kids, but maybe that's being looked at.
Well, I think as a district, we want our children to continue to be a part of our district. I think the challenge is, and whether if we start with our staff, and you have staff that have underlying health conditions, and they can't be at work, what are we going to do, right? So, and the HR side of this is a huge conversation. But then you also have our students, and we can provide through our policies, we can provide remote instruction. But again, if there's 3 children out of a class at Russell, and there's 3 out at Edgerton, and there's 3 at Rankin, so you start to build kind of this group. So we have this group of students who need instruction, and then there's different ways to look at that. One is through synchronous teaching, which means that you're basically putting a video camera in everybody's classroom. But that's also assuming that everybody has great bandwidth and connectivity, and that the camera is of high enough resolution that you could actually see what's being presented. And then you have the asynchronous teaching, which would be, it's going to look very similar to what we did this spring. Maybe with some modifications and building in some more lessons and not just pushing out assignments to our students. But I think that definitely has to be a part of the overall plan in what we do.
Thank you. Other questions from the audience? Okay. Ma'am?
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Stevens. I'm a teacher here at Flathead High School. I teach choir, and I'm also the parent of a 2nd grader who will be going to Hedges. And I wanted to just speak briefly today about my position that a universal mask policy in any of these phases until, as Micah pointed out, until we are 100% done with COVID is a reasonable option. And so I just wanted to provide some resources for the board, some recent guidance and information about mask wearing as the first really point of defense in preventing the spread of infection in our schools. As a person who is worried about going back to work next year and who is worried for my child, I really feel like our goal as a district should be 0 infected students and staff while maintaining face-to-face instruction. And we all know that may not be possible, but I think that should be our goal. We should be working towards how can we have no infected staff and students. So I've provided some resources that talk about aerosolized particles, videos that show the efficacy of masks. And I would also like to ask that our school board and superintendent advocate with our county government to inspire them to implement universal mask requirement in Flathead County to give our schools the best possible chance of safely providing in-person instruction. Obviously, we're all concerned about the trajectory of infection in Flathead County right now, and it sure looks like the evidence right now points towards that we could be improving that situation if our entire community was behind us in helping us to have the safest possible option for starting in-person instruction in the fall. So I'd like to just provide that information for the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Rebecca?
Are we under the situation where we're not allowed to respond to public comment at this point, or are we allowed to, I'd very much like to ask this.
It's just a matter of receiving comments. It's
What?
not, it's just a matter of receiving comments.
So we can,
Just receive.
okay.
Further comments? Let's see, Mr. Sean Anderson, online. Okay. All right,
Everybody hear me
Sean?
okay? I just got unmuted.
Perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, my name is Sean Anderson, and I have two children, a second grader, or sorry, now he's a third grader and a first grader at Peterson Elementary School. And I think Bill addressed quite a bit of the decision-making about how, not just how the schools will function within each phase, but how they will determine if they are in each phase. And a lot of that decision-making gets pushed back to the county level, and listening to our county health board and our public health officer. And my question is, I wanted to clarify something that the interim director for public health hasn't yet been installed, and Hillary Hansen has left her position as the county health officer. And that interim director won't be installed until this Thursday's meeting at 1 o'clock, which is essentially leaving us in a vacuum of authority for half a week. And my question to this board is, do you trust our county leadership and our county commissioners and our county health board to provide that necessary leadership at the same time that they are leaving a vacuum in authority at that very position that we are seeking that direction from? I personally find it very troubling, and I think it's something that the school board has a lot of power and influence to get to those things.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Let's see, I see Lynn Dykstra has chatted question only. Wondering about requirement to wear masks for all students of a certain grade. So we'll take that under consideration too as we move through the whole process. Okay. Further questions or comments?
There's one in the back there, Lance.
Yes, please. And you can state your name, and it is being recorded.
My name is Cheryl Elzig, and I'm a parent of a high schooler that goes here and an elementary student that will be leaving elementary and going to the middle school. And I missed maybe at the very beginning, I kind of came in at the, I think you were already in session. So I don't know, is there a date that school is to start up again?
August 24th.
August 24th?
For
As of now,
teachers.
okay. And also, that was my main question, but I wanted to give you a perspective, being a parent of two, and I want to give you a thriving story and not a non-thriving story. So when this all happened last year, and then we just kind of, went from going to school to not going to school and then going online, I had, I guess I'll let you guess which is, I had one of my children that thrived, did really well online, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a piece of cake, I could just, just see going online all the time. Okay, well then I had my other child that did not thrive online. He just, he became, at first it was a little bit okay, and I helped him and I pushed him, but I'm also had my own job, so it made it really difficult. And it finally got to a point that basically in the end, if this had continued on after like 2 months, I mean, it was kind of like what was about March or April that this happened, and then June. If it had gone any longer, both him and I probably both would have been seeking mental health. So I'm kind of a parent that's kind of on the fence because I had one that did so well and one that did so not well. So I just kind of wanted to, I like you said, if there was an answer, you know, it would be great, but I can really feel for parents, like I was trying to say, I mean, I guess if I just had one, I would have been pushing, oh yeah, let's go online. But luckily, I guess in some way, my eyes opened up because I had one of each one. So I am really, I'll just tell you, my high schooler is the one that really thrived, and he did so well, and he's going to be a junior this year, so he's only got 2 more years. It was my younger one that did not, and so he was a 6th grader or 5th grader, now going to 6th grade, so he's got more years than my other one who is older. So then I'm like, really was pushing, you know, because he's younger and has so many more years that I really want him in that setting because it really was hard on him. After, I mean, you know, like I said, he might have done well for about a month, but to go a whole school year at home, none of us would be well. Anyway, that's my story. That's kind of what, you know what I mean? So I hope you have here, you know what I mean? And you've got 3 kids and they all do really well. Maybe they should somehow, you know, stay at home and be online and what have you not. But if you're like me and you've got one that does and one that doesn't, what do you do? You know? And if it had been the opposite way, if my high schooler would have been the one that hadn't done well, I thought, well, you know, he's so close to being done, you know, and stuff, that just push him over the line or something, but it wasn't that way. Anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. Not an uncommon comment. Chuck Cummins online makes a comment. I'd second the comment that masks for all students and staff should be required at the first line of defense for infection spread. Micah, I also saw there's some paper here about possible change for the 2020-21 calendar.
Yeah, and I think this is something that we can bring up now, and we'll have some greater discussion as an administrative team. But in front of you, and I'll pull up the document on here. So you have 2 calendars in front of you, and one was the original calendar, the one that was adopted by the board in February. And one of the concerns that we have and that was expressed from staff and administration was, you know, depending on what phase we open in, right? Right now we're saying it's phase 2, that there is a need for some additional professional development, and we've kind of outlined some of those things. The hard part is those first 2 days of school where we don't have students is extremely challenging. It's already full of events, so to speak, and faculty meetings and trainings, and we're going to have somewhere close to 50 new employees in the district to start the year. I think, Michelle, you said 14 in your building alone. So we have some challenges, but I think, you know, given the light of what we're looking at, and if we're required to go back to phase 1 and what that looks like, we need to be able to provide our staff some additional opportunities at the beginning of the year to be able to put those plans in place and for our administrative team to solidify that. And so some of the things that we talked about was the potential of changing the calendar to move some of the PIR days, which usually that's from 1:30 to 3:30, depending on what building you're in, if you're elementary, middle, or high school, but there's usually a 2-hour block of time where our teachers have an opportunity to do professional development. And we've kind of come up with a plan where we could make that work, whether we do 2 days, whether it's 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, we have some options in front of us. And so on those 2 calendars, I have the original calendar up. What we're really looking at is this one. So if we went to 4 days of professional development to start the year, we need to pull that time from other places, and we can't add to the teacher's contract. They have a certain number of days, and we also are required to achieve a certain number of instructional minutes with our students. So what we looked at was pulling there were 3 early releases that we looked at, one in September, one in October, and one in May. So that buys us 6 hours, so we can have one additional day with that. And then we looked at, here, let me close this. We looked at the, where is it, up here. January 18th has traditionally been a full day of PIR for our staff, and students were not in session. That's Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. But we also had a snow day for February 15th, which is President's Day. So if we took the PIR day, moved it to, say, the 27th, that captures our staff, but we've lost instructional time on that day for our students. So what we're recommending is then it would be to take the snow day that was scheduled, snow makeup day that was scheduled for the 15th, and turn that into an instructional day. So that's a way that, it doesn't necessarily impact, instructional minutes, and also does not add length to the teacher's contract as a possibility. So I just wanted to bring that forward as an item to consider, and, just for discussion at this point, but hopefully by next Tuesday, we can have a recommendation to you on what that could look like.
And I see Tasha Hogden has a comment. I'm curious what it may look like if there is an exposure in the classroom for the teacher as well as the students, and what the protocol may be to handle that situation.
Can I bring up the OPI guide?
Yes, you can. Did I jump ahead of you there, Micah?
No.
Okay.
Nope. So that was a great question, and I know you guys don't need to respond to that, but OPI has issued guidance relative to what would happen if there was an exposure, and gotta get right here. So they have this decision tree, and if there was a confirmed person with COVID-19 in the building, we need to assess the risk. And in assessing the risk, you could potential 2 to 5 day building dismissal to clean, disinfect, contact trace in consultation with local health officials. So play the scenario out. Bill gets sick. We shut down the building for 2 days. We clean, we disinfect, we come back. I'm sick. We shut down the building for 2 days. Clean, we disinfect, we come back. Lance is sick. So, I mean, you can see how in perpetuity this could be an ongoing problem if our schools are open. But like with the county health department, when they're talking about contact tracing, they're not of the opinion that you need to just immediately shut everything down and go back. They really want to identify and look at who had specifically close contact, as in less than 6 feet apart for a prolonged period of 15 minutes or more in an enclosed space. So they may say, you know what, you don't need to close down the school. We just need to talk with this group of kids, or whatever it may be. But you can see how that could play out in a school year.
Who would be doing that assessment work, Micah?
County Health Department. They have specifically said that they want to do all of that work. So you don't start lighting up the phone tree and so if 3 of us were in a room and Lance, wasn't ever part of a conversation between Bill and I, he wouldn't actually be considered a close contact if he wasn't ever part of that definition of close contact. So they want to make sure that they are the ones doing that.
So on the instructional minutes that we are required, do possible school closures affect that, or are there still waivers out there from last year, or would we go to online so that would not be an instructional minute issue at all, or do we know yet?
The answer to that is in the policies in the 1900 series. So the board has taken some specific action to address the instructional minutes so that even up to the point of declaring an emergency for 1 day or other options. But we would be able to address that. And I think it brings up a good point that in our policies, we're probably going to have to, at the meeting on the 21st, look at those and refine some of the language in them to reflect what we want to do with our plan.
Ma'am?
Hi, my name is Terry Smith, and I have a unique way of looking at this. I also have a preschool child care, and I work at Target. So I have lots of experience with this COVID thing. I can tell you that from the child care point of view, we take the temperature every day, 3 times a day. I have 11 students. Cleaning is nonstop. So when I'm looking at our elementary age group, masks aren't going to, at least for a second, they're going to be touching it. It's not going to work. Our kids read off of our face. If they can't see their teacher's face, for me, in my facility, I won't wear a mask with my children. I've already spoken with all my parents, of course. They feel comfortable with that. My parents aren't allowed in my building. They have to drop off outside. There's ways of doing it that everybody can be safe and keep as many kids in school as possible and keep our teachers that we desperately need in school for our students. Our kids, as a grandmother and watching 3 of my grandchildren, some did great, some did not. But nothing can replace what happens here in these buildings. Our kids need their teachers, they need their principals, they need to know that they're safe and that their world is not falling apart. I had preschoolers looking at me and saying, "Oh, I saw you today in your box," when we were on the computer. And, you know, that's great, but the first time they came back in May, to have a 4-year-old look at you and say, can I touch you, but do you have the virus? It was like heartbreaking to me. And so I think the mental health component to this is really important too for our, not only our children, but our staff. They are a huge part of our children's mental health. So I just want to commend you on doing the best that you possibly can do, and know that as a community, we support you because we know that you're doing the best you can do, but our kids need their schools and they need their teachers. They need their administrators to have good mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. An online comment. The Northwest Montana Fair is scheduled to happen August 19th to 23rd, and at this time will be held at full scale. Has the proximity of this event to the first day of school been considered for the potential to spread infection? So, that's the question. Any other questions or thoughts or things we can control? Sean O'Donnell has a comment. Do you want to?
We invite multi, so I will share this in the chat.
Okay. And Mike, I guess one question I would have for you, what kind of direction or what kind of feedback do you want from the board tonight?
I guess if primarily as you look at this, the phase plan, I need to know if you're comfortable with it, so that when we come back on the 21st, if we get more feedback, and certainly our administrative team has feedback, and I've been receiving emails in an ongoing manner with feedback. But I guess just to know that we're headed in the right direction and that you would support that, so that we can really, I mean, we've been working very hard at trying to answer the how, but we really need to be able to do that so that we can move forward. And we can have some things in place. You know, there's usually a barrage of emails that start happening around August 1st. Thank you, Callie. And, you know, but we need to be able to give our staff and our families some guidance and direction so that they know what to expect. And so that, you know, if we're providing remote instruction for a certain group of students, we need to start asking, we need to be able to get surveys out. We need to start asking the question, are you coming to school? Or, you know, and we need to ask our questions, those questions of our staff as well. So I guess that's really what we're after, Lance.
Okay.
And if you want modifications to it, let's talk about it, and we can start working those into the plan.
You know, I think the one thing that jumps to me, in general, the phases make sense to me. But the one I would note, and the one I would think many families are concerned about, is if they choose to do remote learning, even in phase 3. You know, it doesn't seem like that's an option unless you're in one of the protected classes. You know, and I'm guessing that there's just going to be a level of comfort that even until there's a vaccine, that there's going to be a safety issues and concerns. So I'm not sure how to bridge that gap, but I would just put that out there. Jack?
Well, that would be the technology question that you alluded to as to how well can you do remote learning in the classroom at the same time for those students that you have regular class schedules, and to what degree is technology available for that? And I'm assuming that'll be discussed and assessed over the next 2 weeks to 4 weeks.
Mr. Sean O'Donnell has a comment. I agree with the others that spoke about mandatory masks in the classroom. The ultimate goal should be to keep everyone safe and keep school open. If some of the student staff aren't wearing masks, it puts us all at risk. And to let you know, too, our fellow trustees, Amy and Ursula, are also online. Amy, Ursula, do you guys have any questions for what has been presented?
This is Ursula. I do have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, coming in loud and clear.
Okay, great. So there was a little bit of technical difficulty at the beginning. Hopefully I didn't miss this, but with the phases, what determines what phase we're in? Is that based on the county?
Right now, Ursula, this is Micah, it is based off of the governor's direction, and then the governor has basically said that it defaults to the county at this point. And the county is saying we're operating with the governor's directive, but in consultation with KRMC and North Valley Hospital, they would make a determination based on whether or not they can support additional cases in the hospital. If there's more hospitalizations and there's no beds, that becomes an issue.
And is their terminology in line with ours? Does their phase 1 line up with our phase 1?
Whose phase? I know what our phase is, or like the
governor's
county.
phase.
Yeah, our phase lines up with the governor's.
Using the same, like if they say the state is in phase 1, that means that we are in phase 1?
Correct.
Okay, and then I have one more question. If some of the suggestions that I have seen, I know that we're not talking necessarily about how to implement them, but I saw Bill had the document he's working on. Are there going to be ways to have distancing, or are we going to, like, basically it seems like we could do masks or distancing or both. Is distancing actually an option we have?
Without masks or with? Or both?
Either way, can we actually get our kids 6 feet apart?
Not all of them. We would have to reduce our class sizes to socially distance.
And then has it been discussed at all about reducing class sizes? Are these all still things that are in the works?
You know, it has been discussed, but again, going back to the rationale and the, you know, that there is not there's not evidence to suggest that by reducing the student-to-teacher ratio that you are actually doing anything to mitigate the spread of COVID.
And then is that the same though as like that the distancing doesn't seem to, I thought I read through the documents. I thought in the documents that it said that the keeping 6 feet away did mitigate the risk. Is that the same or not the same?
Yeah, I would say yes. You know, if you were to just go off of the general requirement that, you know, social distancing is 6 feet away if you aren't wearing a mask, right? That would be considered a safe distance. And so your question, it kind of has it's a double-edged sword. So if we can't be 6 feet away, then the only option at this point would be that we would probably need to be wearing masks. If we are 6 feet away, then you wouldn't necessarily need it, but that would be one more tier, one more layer of mitigation.
Jack, you have a comment?
Yes, Ursula, the biggest difficulty with smaller class sizes and distancing is the financial cost. Whether we would, I'll use the phrase double shift classes, meaning a morning set of classes, an afternoon, or lease other facilities to help address, you know, maybe we could fit a whole bunch of people in the Shopko store or the Walmart store and have classes out there. We still have increased personnel costs, leases, and transportation costs, none of which our current budget could handle, and I wouldn't venture to guess where we could even come up with the money for it. Even though transportation is a permissive levy and we can tax the public for that without their permission, they probably wouldn't be real happy about that. And besides that, we don't have time to go to a vote to ask for general fund money to do the same thing, to hire additional personnel. So the difficulty in phase one and also phase 2 or 3 for reduced class sizes and work on social distancing is financially impossible. Is that the right word?
And Lynn Dykstra had a comment, which I'd agree. Recognize that 3 feet apart is still distancing. It's just not as well as 6 feet apart.
I can bring my hoops.
Yeah.
In speaking with your administrative team and building level, you know, everybody you've got working on this, if we opened this fall, brought students back to the buildings, how confident are you that we can do this safely? I'm hearing some general things that seem to be, you know, non-negotiable. Universal mask policies, the board advocating with other officials in the county, the state, you know, to push the social distancing to masks. How confident are you that we can open safely?
I think with the right measures in place, you know, and if I go back to the discussion that we had at our board retreat, and the number one priority was to educate our kids in the building, I think we can do that. But if being 100% open means that we need to wear face masks, then that's what I want to do. And you know, and it doesn't mean that it's indefinite. You know, we can do it on a 2-week window and contact our county health department and say, okay, you know, because you know, I really do worry that when we open, you're going to see a spike if people aren't if we aren't taking the necessary steps to mitigate the spread of COVID. You know, and it doesn't matter what phase we're on in any plan. You know, unless you're in option 0, in phase 0, there's going to be risk. There's inherent risk in all of that.
Stu, I'd just add that, you know, no matter what we do, we're just improving the odds. It's risk management. I mean, there's not, I wish we could guarantee everybody's 100% safety, but I just don't know if that's possible.
But, I mean, I'm very confident team that we have here, that we can do this in a reasonable manner. I mean, I'm really struggling with this, but I do have faith in this team that they're putting together some very good methods to deal with it. And I appreciate hearing from the community too. Hear from the community every time I go to the grocery store.
Which is not often, I hope.
Rebecca, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, actually, I have only 3 things ago, but I love the 2-week window concept, that 2-week period is really so crucial. So even if starting with a 2-week math possibly and see where we are, see what's, going on. I was really impressed with that thought. One thing about Jack's comment about the double days of mornings and afternoons, the one thing that helps, and again, I'm not advocating for it, but it does solve a problem that I haven't seen addressed, and maybe that's a how question, of lunch. We all know you can't eat lunch in a math. I mean, there might be shields or there might be other options, but that's one thing that is addressed by that double schedule, although I said I have no skin in the game, but lunch is something, a big how question to me. But the real thing, I wanted to talk about the phases. To me, we're kind of between phase 0 and phase 1 at the end of the year. We had that ag station piece, but we had the buildings essentially closed. I kind of found phase 1 confusing because the student groups kept together, but the primary delivery is online. And I somewhat understand that that's to give you some flexibility, but I think that, cleaning up phase 1 to make it say, it's online, or groups of not 1-to-1, but groups of up to 10 for specific things like band or whatever, or ag station. And then to me, there's a really big jump between phase 1 and phase 2, especially if phase 2 is what we're considering. I'd like to, to see a slightly leveler movement from 1 to 2. We move from hand sanitizing is required to feasible. I think it's just as feasible in 2 as it is in 1. Let's go back to required. And of course, that face covering, we move from face coverings required to face covers may be required. And I think if phase 2 is our primary phase, we really need to think about phase 2. And another thing, if we're talking about masking anybody, whether or not I don't think does relate to 1905, public visitors to school limited. I'd like to see public schools, visitors to schools on an absolute mask basis. That's an external influence. That's somebody possibly bringing something in. So I really do think that the public visitor, we may not be able to tell our staff or students to wear masks. We can certainly tell a contractor, in my view.
Yeah, there is, MTSBA has provided some guidance with some signage that they're recommending be posted at the entrances to the school doors, and so those kind of things would be addressed in that.
Awesome.
And, like in phase 2 right now, where you see the may be required in common area, that is pulled out of our current policy, 1905, and so that's something that we would have to readdress, both in the plan document and in the policy document.
So we have a few more online. Amy Waller has a comment, a fellow trustee. Amy, can you hear us? Amy, there you are. Maybe?
Can you hear me?
Oh, great. Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Well, I apologize because I've been having technical difficulties and I missed a large part of this, so I'll play catch up tomorrow. But I heard Micah say that he just wanted some feedback from the board, and I would just like to encourage all of the just dedicated, brilliant minds that are think tanking about what we're going to do is to just keep perspective that this is global and that there's a lot of problem solving going on all over the world. And that I just want to hope that the teams and that they're thinking beyond Montana, they're thinking to other states, they're thinking to global and always looking at what is working and, keeping science in mind, and also just looking at the solutions that have been tried and are working. And I just hope, I just want to I just encourage broadening our view as we figure this all out. It's definitely going to be trial and error. So I have total faith in our teams. I know they're some of the smartest, most dedicated minds in the world working on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And I would just add to that, in terms of the plan and the flexibility of it, I think, CDC is supposed to be releasing some new guidance. So those things are, so as people learn more, as we become more educated, as the scientists figure out, more about COVID-19 and who it affects and those kind of things, I think we need to keep that in mind as well, that we could receive some new guidance that will alter our thinking and our planning. So it is ever evolving.
Daniel Nelson has a comment. Okay, Daniel, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right. Because this COVID can present asymptomatically, it creates a scenario where you can have a teacher or faculty or student who, for whatever reason, is tested and comes back positive and may have been infectious for the previous week, exposing students and other faculty and whatnot. So do you have a plan in place if that scenario was to happen, where you get someone who is showing no symptoms but does receive a positive test? How far downstream would you look at quarantining? Would all their classmates, because they've potentially been infected for a week's time?
Thank you for the question.
You want me to respond to that?
I can respond. So I think we touched on that earlier. OPI has given instructions, and really we would have the county do the trace testing. So that would be handed over to the healthcare professionals. Lynn Dykstra has a comment. It's actually a question. What's the plan for busing students safely? It seems like that's addressed in the phases, and really I probably imagine the big question is, will they be required to wear masks? And that's further
to answer that question. Yeah, and it's a great question. So, if you're requiring social distancing of, say, 6 feet on a bus, we might be able to get 24 to 26 kids on a bus. We would have to double or triple some of our routes in order to make that happen. The guidelines right now are 50 or fewer. Family members could sit together, which may, help in some cases. And Annie has been working on the transportation piece and looking at our routes that would potentially have more than 50. But one of the things that we're planning on doing, and when we survey our parents, is that some parents aren't going to feel comfortable sending their kid on the bus because of COVID. So we're going to try and identify and really narrow down what that looks like.
Jack?
So the fun thing for Annie to figure out will be, they take the temperature when they get on the bus, and the temperature's high. Do they tell the person to get off the bus and you're not our responsibility? And what happens to the parent that's gone to work and their child's home without parental supervision? And that's just quick and dirty of it. So that obviously has a lot of irresponsibilities in the nature of it, but that's one of the oddities about how to handle it. Do you try and make sure a parent is home before the bus leaves the bus stop? And who's going to be there to take the temperatures when the bus driver is responsible for transportation and not for the health of the individual students in this particular case? So what kind of additional costs will we be incurring as a result of that, which is transportation, which we can charge taxpayers for, but those are just some of the oddities with the transportation issue besides running extra bus trips.
All right, thank you, Jack. Another comment, Amy Royans-Seward has a comment. Thank you for the recognition of those families who may prefer an online learning option for the foreseeable future. We have a child with special health care needs whose safety we need to prioritize. Liz Sikora would like to address the board.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Perfect. So my name is Liz Sikora, and I teach at Flathead High School. I just have a question for the board or something to ponder. I live in Whitefish, and as you know, they passed the required mask today. And just looking at like the Daily Interlakes comments, a lot of them are great. Like, I won't be shopping at Whitefish. And so my question to the board or something to ponder is, what are we going to do with the population of our students who are anti-mask? As a high school teacher, if a student shows up in my class and refuses to wear a mask, what are the options for me as a teacher or for the school board?
Thank you, Liz. That's a good question to ponder. We'll turn that over to administration.
Michelle, it's in your building, so.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Mark?
Disinfection between classes, is that going to require more time, or teams, student involvement?
Yeah, and there are, those are part of the hows that we're working on. One option is that, especially at your middle and high school, that, there's going to be a certain amount of time that's going to have to be dedicated, that we're going to have the wipes, and every kid's responsible for wiping down their desk and those kind of things. One thing that I will mention, in our ESSER fund budget, we have built in a placeholder for Bruco to come in and do an assessment of our cleaning and our custodial routines and the things that need to happen, and looking at those high touch point areas. And the way the contract is stated right now, if approved, is that they would have that recommendation back to us no later than August 24th, which is kind of pretty close to the start of school. But we are looking at those things as well, just to make sure that, of any of the mitigation factors that we can control, that we're going to try and attempt to do that to the best we can. But yeah, I mean, potentially, class periods at the high school are 50 minutes, and now they might be 48 because the last 2 minutes is going to require a new protocol for doing that.
Sue?
A question about the calendar.
Yes.
Those 4 days at the beginning of school for the training, is that something that you get a sense of the building level teachers and staff are happy with? I know I would have been with. It came up in conversations with our staff and when I was at Glacier High School and the feedback. So in June, we spent a lot of time together talking about, what do you need as a staff member going into next year, and looking at, all our different options. And, and some things that we recognize that came out of that is we have to spend some time teaching our kids how to be online learners if we have to go back to that. So there's these pieces that we need to have along the way. With 50 new staff who don't know how to use PowerSchool, we're going to have, or Google Classroom, or any of those things, depending on the platform that we would end up using for that. We're going to need to provide some additional support and training for our staff. I think those extra days are really important. I mean, on top of just the normal beginning of school items, you've got all these new things. So, yeah, I like that idea, that trade-off.
Yeah, and I'll be honest that it's not, 100% unanimous with our building administration on that. There's some value to that day in January. There's been some great work that's gone on in our elementary schools, and so you start pulling away some of those opportunities, and they're kind of gone. So we're kind of putting all our eggs in one basket. So, if that day isn't there in October, and we realize, man, there's something that we really need here. But I think there's some other potential opportunities as well that the board can consider to create opportunities.
Diane?
So some of our kids here may have a sibling who's in another district, like West Valley versus here. So is there coordination with the other districts about what their plans are?
Yes. In full disclosure, the other districts are really looking to KPS to kind of lead the way. And I know that Columbia Falls, they had their board meeting yesterday. Evergreen also had theirs, and their plan was approved. We're a little behind the 8 ball in terms of saying, yes, let's get going, let's move. But there is definitely coordination. I think if there's a big difference, what you're going to see is a difference between what's happening in phase 1. You know, some communities are really adamant that we're just going to go to an A-day, B-day, and that's what we're going to do. That isn't my recommendation at this point in terms of the plan, but I would also say that, you know, if you guys give me guidance and say, we want an A-day, B-day, we want some sort of schedule that's going to acknowledge that, I think the flexibility is there. It's just not explicitly stated that that's immediately what we're going to.
Rebecca?
One thing I didn't see listed in the phases, and maybe it's just space and whatever, we know that we had, you know, one of the science teachers from the high school come to us and talked about shared equipment. He specifically talked about goggles, but it is in the CDC, I think, not OPI recommendations about limiting shared equipment. I assume that's somewhere, I don't know if that's phase 2 or 3, but is that thought is somewhere in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
It
is. And that's part of
That's more in the document that I showed you, the guidance to the operational
okay. And I didn't.
And I would say that really that is something that, as we experience this, it probably is going to be more common in any phase that we're in. The reduction of that, I know at the elementary level, you love to, here's your supply list, and we're going to bring it in, and it all comes together in one big pot, and then as we go, we give it, you know, and those practices, I think, are just going to become less and less just to protect ourselves, even when the virus is over, you know, as we go down the road.
Yeah, we won't be stirring tubas.
Any other comments or questions? Sarah?
This is
Hold on.
Ursula. Can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead, Ursula. Then we'll go.
Okay, sorry, it's tricky getting in there. So I have a question, and it's, you know, one of those tough ones. We've talked a little bit about the financial impact of trying to make all of this work. I don't know what kind of feedback you've been getting from parents and things like that, but I get the impression that there is at least a large handful of people that are really considering not putting their kids into, not enrolling their students if there's not an online option. Is that something we're taking into consideration? Is that a financial hit that we are prepared to take if our enrollment goes down? What's being discussed with that?
It is a huge factor in what we do. You know, the majority of our funding is generated through our student count, our A and B, our average number belonging. And for every student that you lose, you're going to lose a significant portion of money. You know, at the high school level, the average, I think, is around $7,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gwen. You know, so if you lost 10 students, that's a $70,000 hit to your general fund budget. So yeah, those are definitely being considered in all options. And you know, ultimately, we do not want to lose one of our students as a result of this. So whatever we can put in place to support them. You know, some of the comments that, you know, in emails that I've gotten from parents asking about that, my child is immune compromised, or you know, I don't feel comfortable sending them. My general response is, you know, we would look to provide that education. It just may not be the Cadillac model that we provide inside the 4 walls of the classroom. There's no way we can offer woods and welding and BOAG and theater arts and all these specialty classes that we offer in an online environment. So it would be probably scaled down, but we would still be able to provide an education.
Thank you, Ursula. Sarah, do you have a comment?
Just real quick,
Can you step up by the microphone?
Sarah Cole, Director of Special Services. I just wanted to share that, if the board decided to go full on with masks, I would fully support that for our community. I just want to acknowledge that there are students with disabilities, primarily younger students, who, for whatever reason, would not be able to maintain a mask. Students in our Aspire elementary program who desperately need modeled for them facial expressions and all of those social emotional skills, or students with autism in a life skills program who will not keep a mask on. We have to really be flexible, I think, in serving our unique populations. I just don't want to see them miss out on an education because they're not able to keep a mask on. So I just want to keep that group in mind as we're thinking about the mask.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
And things do vary widely.
Rebecca?
Things do vary widely. A number of the language of some of the, various things going in are, face coverings, and I think be talking about face coverings more generally might be more appropriate, especially for things like that. I know my children who aren't that young still prefer to use a buff to a mask, and I'm like, if I can get compliance with a buff, go for it. But particularly shields, I noticed that one of the documents you sent out said shields were more expensive. At least manufacturing on the home level, shields are far, far cheaper. So I don't know if that's old information but anyway, so I don't think, I think for things like that where you want facial expression, shields are a really interesting option. And I think the statement about saying that they were pricier is maybe overstated.
Okay, thank you. Sean Erickson has a question.
Yes, I'm Sean Erickson. I have a student at Glacier. I'm also a K-5 special education teacher at a different school district. And one of the things that I am concerned about sending my son back to school is, for one, the masks. People in town, out and about town, aren't even wearing their masks. I'm concerned about him being in classrooms and on the bus with kids who are not wearing masks. My other thing is I have, you're talking about the temperature checks. One of the concerns I have is I have seen this as a teacher where parents will give their kids some Tylenol before they send them off to school. So then temperature doesn't show up. So I guess my question is, what are you guys prepared to do on that?
Drug test them each time before they show up.
Right. Thank you, Sean.
Can we talk about that specific aspect, health screenings in general?
Yeah, let's talk about health screenings in general.
In general, I think that was a really good point that, I can take an ibuprofen and it could reduce my temperature. I could be running into work because I'm running late, or I ride my bike to work, my poor body temperature, so in this document, we're really putting that responsibility on the parents to do the health screenings with their kids. And, they got the sniffles, and, we've had attendance policies, I think, in the past that some would argue encourage kids to come to school sick because of finals and things like that. And those, right now are suspended, and we're going to have to, relook at that. But, you think about even the screenings that if you've been to the airport, or, I went to Flathead Lake Lodge and I got screened and they asked me these questions, and you think, well, how well does a kindergartner or a first grade understand the concept of 72 hours? Did you travel out of state? Mm-hmm. And well, did they? So there's a practicality to whether or not we're doing health screenings, in the building or before they get on the bus. And, we kind of talked about some of those rabbit holes of, kid shows up with a temperature on the bus, mom and dad are long gone to work, and what do you do with the kid? Do you sit there? So I think there's some practicality to that. And I guess I would just be open to whatever feedback you have in regards to whether that should be, a requirement of the school to do those screenings, or should that be on the onus of the parents to to manage that aspect?
Both. I think that's just the reality it's going to have to be. I mean, I would think that, you know, we want every child to have parents that are going to be responsible and take temperatures. That's not always the case, though. So, you know, I know there in the budget, you know, we are hiring some new nurses, both the elementary and high school level, that will hopefully pick up where parents don't. Jack?
The health screening is puzzling, and I'll give two examples. One is you want to go in for an elective medical procedure. They want to take a test 5 days before you go in. Then you go in, how do they know you didn't contract something in the next 2 to 3 days and then pass it on? The other one is the element which was referred to earlier, asymptomatic, where people, it was said early on that you could go 3 to 5 days without symptoms and still be contagious. They've now extended it to 7 days because they've seen situations where somebody's had it for 7 days with no symptoms at all. So temperature isn't going to work. The questions aren't going to work. You can pass it on. And then some of the studies are saying that once you start showing the symptoms, you're not as contagious anymore because you've already taken care of everybody else. So that's a dilemma. Those are the two dilemmas. And then I'll share the false positives. So there was an individual that went into the hospital 10 days ago, died 2 days later, but when he went in, he got tested as with COVID. They did an autopsy, and it was a false negative. The state came in and did the third test and confirmed that it was a false positive. The first two tests were done by the same hospital. So how accurate are the tests? So there's another dilemma. The last dilemma I'm going to share is everybody said that we have more things going on in the state now than we did in April when we went into phase 0. So what's the difference? Why aren't we in phase 0 now? So there's a lot of dilemmas out there that do not have consistency through them, nor do they have any answers. And so that's the dilemma that I have is, how do you make decisions when we don't know the accuracy of we really don't know what's happening to everybody out there. And there's a lot of people that 1 out of every 3 people may have it or may have already had it, and we don't know who those other 2 people are or who those 3 people are for that matter. So how do you make decisions with so many unknowns is a dilemma that I see.
Thank you, Jack. Any other questions or comments? Jennifer? Yeah.
This is Jennifer Beezer again, and I just want to share an experience as a healthcare provider. I used to work with a team with children and adults with cystic fibrosis, which is a disease that affects the entire body. They are immunocompromised and they're highly susceptible to any of the bugs in the community. And they have always lived 6 feet apart. Well, I guess I shouldn't say always. I should say in most of our lifetime, they have lived 6 feet apart. They used to go to camp and do group therapy together, and it was discovered that they were transmitting really bad pathogens to each other, and they were dying. So they stopped having CF camp, and they stopped letting CF families come together, and they've lived 6 feet apart. I think the foundation, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, may have some really valid and interesting modalities for us to look at as we think of outside the box. How do we help kids deal with the mental health aspects of living 6 feet apart? And we are talking about even siblings with CF who have had to separate themselves. I mean, the mental health impacts are not to be ignored, for sure. They have some amazing modalities that we could incorporate as a school district and really positively impact our students. I'm the same as the mom who said she had 2 students and one did great and one did not do so great. This principal, the one who did not do so great, is over there. But I think really thinking outside the box, and maybe none of us have ever heard of cystic fibrosis in this room, but they have some really cool, proven modalities that they're using for online mental health resources, how they're getting kids together, how they're getting adults together without being together. So anyways, thought I'd share that resource.
Thank you, Jennifer. So Sean Erickson online has a follow-up question. He's looking for specific, what prepared to do with parents who knowingly send their children to school. So, Micah,
We refer to that to the administration.
refer that to.
No, I mean, and
What do we do now?
when they knowingly send their kids to school sick,
Yep.
we call them and have them come home. You know, but the difference now will be we have to have an isolation room, you know, in each building. We have to have a place dedicated and specified for that. And then the person who's dealing with the child is going to have to be in a mask and, you know, take extra precautions, you know, for those things. So, you know, the list of challenges and the what ifs and it just goes on and on and on and on. I mean, it's never ending, and we're just going to, you know, be as flexible as we can and deal with those situations as they arise. And you know, I trust my administrative team to make good decisions, and we will.
I do believe that the health department has rules and regulations that we can work with them if we know of parents. Hopefully they don't do that.
Lance?
Second, Amy.
We can work with them to.
Amy?
Well, I was just going to comment, I've heard some concerns about whether masks are appropriate in all situations. And I guess it's reiterating my past comment about, we just really need to look at what's being done elsewhere and think outside the box. Because I've seen some articles where there's classes that actually have plexiglass at each desk. I've seen masks that are clear. So I think that there's a lot of technicalities or technical advancements in masks or in keeping a group of students safe that might be expensive, but it might be appropriate for us to look at some special safety equipment as the teams identify these special need groups, and and consider those situations where it is important that the students see the expressions of the teacher, and then look at some of the technical masks that are being developed. And, and then not be so worried about the budget in those situations. Thanks.
Thank you. Tasha Hodkin has got a follow-up comment. With a hybrid model being considered, provide in-class instruction as well as remotely will be a challenge. Budget is also a challenge. A swivel is a great piece of technology. That's a solution to consider. Solution to consider to meet that need if budget allows. Sean Erickson's got another comment. I would also like to know if you are planning for the mental health of the kids. If a friend or staff member contract COVID-19 and possibly not survive. So, yes.
Yeah, and I think, as we talk about things that definitely have an impact on a budget, certainly we could buy those things, but there's also the issue of availability. When every district in the nation is, wrestling with what do, is there enough plexiglass worldwide to satisfy all of those requirements? Certainly trying to get them in place in high traffic areas like the front offices and those kind of things, but is it reasonable to think that we can build 350 plexiglass cubicles for all of our teaching staff? And that would be one way to mitigate, but another way would also be to wear a mask. So I think we have to, again, it is whatever the plan is, you know, you have to be able to walk a mile in the shoes of the people that have to implement the plan and the people that are going to be affected by the plan. So put yourself in the shoes of a kindergartner from the time he gets on the bus until the last bell, or even after the last bell, and is that actually sustainable and feasible from that perspective? We have to be real about what we can do, and there are certainly options and ways that we can look to think outside the box, and people are going to come up with those and say, well, okay, well, what if we did this? So if it's really important that our kindergartners see their teachers' faces in enunciating words and making sounds, they might need to be behind plexiglass and not have a mask on during that moment in time. We can work through those things as they come up.
And to the question about if someone were to pass away with COVID-19, we have a pretty strong system of support for our kids, and we have prioritized mental health issues. I believe that we would wrap those kids up and provide that support. Any other questions or comments as we approach the top of the hour? Jason says we got one more. Okay, go ahead. Deidre, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Deidre. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my question is, if a classroom teacher, I'm thinking more in an elementary school, if the teacher tests positive for COVID and gets sick, will that whole class be quarantined for a certain amount of time? And if they are, during that time when they aren't coming back to school, will they be offered remote learning?
I think an initial response to that would be up to the county health department to decide and to do the contact tracing. If they recommended, yes, you need to quarantine everybody for 14 days, then that's what would happen, and we would provide instruction for those students during that time.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Otherwise, we got one more.
Hi, I'm Susie Trepney. I teach first grade at Russell School. And just sitting here and listening to all of this, I just have have many thoughts, but I'll share just a couple. One of the things that really hits me with the phases is that two of the things that were taken away from ourselves and our students in March was the structure and predictability. And I think that sometimes can be more damaging than the lack of academics. And so when I think about these phases, it's easy for us to think of we are in phase 1, and we move through this as these great big units. But I think the reality of this as a classroom teacher is that this can change in the blink of an eye. And I want my students to somehow, and this will have to be creative thinking, somehow keep the structure and this continuity and predictability of what their education is looking like. So that also not only to teach them ahead of time about the technology and what this looks like at home, but the emotional side of how are we going to slide into this together? And what will this look like if all of a sudden you're at home and I'm at home? And to teach to that as well. And then even within a single classroom, so we may all be in phase 1 or 2, but all of a sudden if I have 3 students that are sick and home, I have to help them transition into a different phase for them and myself. And so for everybody involved, including us as staff, because this gets really tricky and it's a lot to think about and a lot to plan and prepare for, but it's the transitions. Transitions are hard in a classroom on a good day when everyone's there and none of this is present. And so we're talking about a year of massive transitions. And so I think that's an important thing to think about.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
All right, any last comments? And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Ursula.
Thank you.
So here are my big questions. Are we going to provide, are we going to give the opportunity for online instruction for all of our kids where we're just looking at underlying health issues? Because that has, so I'm going to assume that we're going to have some teachers out and that we're going to be able to maybe employ them remotely, but not all. And maybe not in science or not in English. So we're going to have to figure out